welcome to Radonpodden, and this one is in English because we have an international guest with us. So this is a webinar. Dag, chair of the Swedish Radon Association, very welcome. Can you tell us why are we doing this special today?
The main reason is that we want to emphasize and really increase the research around radon and the problem with radon and the causes from radon, the lung cancer risk. And the only way to do that is to invite the country where this is very important. And if you see the number of papers that are published from Canada, I'm impressed, and I really hope that we will have the same level of papers published in Sweden as well about radon for the future.
And we have a guest, and it's not like he haven't been to Sweden before. He actually been here several times. So we say very welcome, Dr. Aaron Goodarzi.
Thank you.
We are very happy to have you here again. Can you please make a short introduction about yourself, but also your research?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Aaron Goodarzi. I'm currently at the Charbonneau Cancer Institute at the University of Calgary in the west of Canada by the Rocky Mountains. And I'm a radiobiologist. I have for many years been studying what happens to our cells when we're exposed to radiation, just as the type that is emitted by radon, as well as other types as well. And in recent years, in the past 12 years, we've really gotten into a much bigger scope of what we do in order to understand how much radon people are exposed to, with a focus on Canada, but also internationally. How we encounter it in our homes, our schools, and our workplaces, and what we can do about it.
But if you compare Canada to Sweden, in Canada you would say that it's an important public health issue, right?
Yes, I mean, you could argue it's an important public health issue wherever there is radon in sufficient quantities to increase lung cancer risk. But a lot of hard work over a lot of years has gone to getting research into radon, public awareness into radon in Canada to where it is today from where it used to be, which was a sort of hardly spoken about silent issue. And it started around the late 2000s, where we lowered our radon action thresholds from 800 becquerels to 200 becquerels. Some workplace testing began, and then in the early 2010s, coincidentally around the same time as I started my lab, a lot more momentum was built up. And I'm happy to say that me and my team and my colleagues have been able to contribute to that. And we're now in a position of Canadian history where radon is perhaps being the most spoken about that it ever has been.
And if we start with buildings and modern living, and you said you started to see the research, how do you see how many people today are measuring their homes?
Right. I mean, it's hard to know exactly how many, although we have a good sense. I'll say this. In the evict radon national study, we called it evict radon because it's a nasty thing in your house and you want to get rid of it, so you evict. This year we will have more than 100,000 households who have contributed data to the national survey. Now, if you allow for all of the other people who tested their house as well, but perhaps they weren't involved in research, I'm optimistic to say that we have at least a quarter, if not 500,000 households that have at some point been tested for radon. Now, there's a lot more than that in Canada. Of course, we have a long way to go. But a lot of people have been testing because they have heard others have tested. They've seen the message enough times from the government, and it's working.
And some people feel like, okay, this is a new house, so there won't be an radon in it.
Yes.
We see this in Sweden. We heard it from other countries around the world. What do you feel is like the biggest mistake when people are designing the new houses?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, either your house will have high radon or it won't. And the absolute only way to know that it will have a problem or not is to test that building. And to test that building once you are living in it, because human behavior has a surprising effect on how much radon there is or isn't in the property, based upon things like, even little things like window opening behavior. But we've seen much more dramatic examples. In Canada, on the other hand, unlike Sweden, new houses tend to have the highest radon.
Yeah.
And so, but we have the kind of the opposite problem. We say, well, just because you're in an old house doesn't mean you don't have high radon. It really, you have to test.
Yeah. Should it be mandatory when it comes to new houses?
Good question. So if you tell someone they must do something, they're actually less likely to do it, in my experience and a lot of the world. You have to encourage it. If you buy and sell a house in many parts of Canada, and this is true in other areas of the world, and if you know it has high radon, you have to disclose that. And I think those are scenarios where you know the house has an issue and you haven't fixed it, you need to disclose that. If you fixed it, oh, it's fine. We actually, over again, more than a decade worth of research has gone into this, lobbying. New houses in Canada as of this year, the new build code will have a proactive radon reduction measure in it. And that's the power of research. All the work that we and others in collaboration with Swedish scientists have done over the past decade has culminated in Codes Canada. These are the folks that decide the federal building code, looking at the scale of the problem and saying, okay, it's so prevalent, we have to do something systematic, system-wide. And they said, okay, full proactive radon reduction system in every new building as soon as that code is implemented. So that was published at Christmas 2025, so only a few months ago. It was great news.
Dag, when you listen to what they did in Canada and really the power of research, do you feel like it's something that lacks in Sweden?
Yes, I do. I mean, I remember I started radon in 86, and I remember in the 90s it was a lot of interest in radon, some papers, some studies, some money from the government, and a lot of things that the research made in the 90s is based for all the conclusions today. And since then, nothing almost has happened until like 5-6 years ago. The Swedish Radiation Protection Institute finally find out that they need more data. And the limitation of data in Sweden is because of the fact that all the data is stored on private service, private company service, and the government do not have access to that. So in Canada, they have money for public research and public measurement surveys. So they have the data. In Sweden, we don't have the data except of the private service. But thanks to some companies in Sweden, then we are able to do this research again and open up and see all the data because we have a lot of measurements. I mean, we have millions of measurements in the database. So I hope that we will make the same decision as they do in Canada. When you're building a new house, you should protect it from the beginning. Yeah. I mean, in Sweden, they don't care. Honestly, they say, okay, you should check for radon, but there's no control of it, very limited control. And even if you have the final certificate of the house, you can have the final certificate for the house without have measured radon. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm. Well, takes time.
And if we go from buildings that you live in to buildings that you work in, the modern working life,
yeah.
You can also have your office as home.
Absolutely.
But speaking about workplaces, what would you say there?
So one of the things we've done over the past few years in Canada is we've understood how all of our lives have changed so much since 2019. Right? The pandemic changed where and how we work a lot. And all of the original information that was published in the 2000s on the relative risk of lung cancer caused by a certain amount of radon was on the basis, essentially, of 20th century activity patterns. How much time we spend at work, at home, outside, in some sort of vehicle, things like that. And that's all changed. And we've demonstrated that's changed for people who are working. For those who are retired or on leave or unemployed, life is back to more or less normal. But for workers, it is not. In Canada, it's a massive shift. Measured double digits, 10, 12, 17% in some cases, of a shift between environments. For many people in certain types of jobs, finance, IT, many of the arts, the professions, like folks like myself, we are working from residential buildings more than we ever have before. And of course, there's innately differential risk between residential and non-residential buildings. Not that non-residential buildings don't have radon. Many of them can have exceptionally high radon, but you have to know. And because everyone's patterns have changed, you have to know that too. And so we've just published the first and largest Canadian activity pattern survey since the 1990s, the first and largest since the 1990s. And that was the hard work of one of my postdoctoral fellows. She's a brilliant young scientist called Monica Casedo-Roa. And what Monica found was that Canadians have shifted where they're working, and it's very dependent upon your job type, and it absolutely makes a difference to your risk from radon.
And if we would compare Sweden and Canada, your research shows that radon exposure is decreasing in Sweden, but it's increasing in Canada. Why?
It has steadily gone down, we found, as a function of the year of construction in Sweden. And we jointly published this with Swedish scientists about 4 or 5 years ago. And over the same period of time, it went up. Now, in the 1950s, just after World War II, a new house in Canada had less radon in it, on average, than a new house in Sweden. By the 1980s, we were both countries building houses with essentially the same radon. And everything from the 1980s onwards, and we have to all recognize that radon in houses wasn't even discovered until the middle of the 80s. The two countries went like this, and Sweden trended in the good direction and Canada trended in the bad direction. And, you know, with the new build code, we're hoping Canada then drops off and meets Sweden where you're at now, which is no risk for a new house, but certainly a lot less than it has been. And we think that's a function of how we've built houses, how we've heated houses differently over the period. It took, again, a lot of hard work from my team and that of others to understand the two build codes and understand radon as a function of building features. And at the end of the day, what we've really discovered, again, through a lot of the work, is that to have a radon problem as a person, you need 3 ingredients. You have to have radon in the ground. Well, Sweden and Canada have radon in the ground, no problem. And the ground hasn't changed over the past 100 years. But because the second ingredient, which is the buildings that capture and retain radon, basically prevent it from being diluted on the wind, as happens all the time out of, you know, the grass. That's changed over time, and it's caused these things. And then, of course, the third ingredient is human behavior. How much time you spend in these buildings. You can have a building with the highest radon imaginable. If no one goes in there, no one's getting cancer. So you have to understand all 3.
But is there something that Canada could learn from Sweden?
Absolutely. You know, I think one of the things and one of the reasons we pursued the Canada and Swedish comparison study a few years ago was to see what Sweden did much better than Canada over the same period of time with regards to houses. We believe it's the so-called Swedish plate foundation with a lot of district heating used that might have had a suppressing effect overall on what used to be higher here when Sweden heated their houses like Canada still does with forced air ventilation, natural gas, and oil-fired central heating. Now, could we even hope to all of a sudden eradicate natural gas and oil-fired central heating in Canada? Of course not. That's not possible. But it was very important for us to learn what was done and what could be done. And a really, really important thing is Swedish houses are beautifully energy efficient. You have mastered the art of energy efficiency in your buildings. Canada is late to that particular party. You started doing it in the 1970s. We didn't really start until the 2010s. Not in the same way. And so we're playing catch up. And because you did it slowly and steadily, your houses can be lower for radon and very energy efficient. But ours, energy efficiency made our radon much worse. And it was really important to do that study to show that in Sweden, you can have a beautifully energy efficient house with low radon. And it wasn't the fault of energy efficiency. That was really important.
And what can Sweden learn from Canada?
Well, I mean, as I think my friend here has been saying, investment in research, getting young researchers involved in the study of radon today, because what radon used to be like in Sweden, let's be honest, it's old news. What we found by studying the data from Canada 20, 30 years ago is that none of that really applies anymore. We've changed how we live. I'll give you just one simple example about the quick changes that can happen. The last national survey of radon in Canada before the one we just recently published was 2012. And at the time, only 30% of the radon tests were placed in the lowest floor of the building, because the advice is always test the air you breathe. When we just published the 2024 survey, 60% are now in the lowest floor of the building. We're all mobilizing our basements for homes and schools and offices and the teenagers' bedrooms, or we're renting them out or whatever, because real estate is precious, it's expensive, it's hard to get, and all those things. And if we had just relied on our old 1990s and 2000s data, we would never have seen that. We would not have understood why radon has actually gone up so much. And that really takes an investment in research as a society. At all levels. And that's one of the things we've done very successfully in the Evict Radon national study. And we always underline the national part of that. You need people in Sweden, you know, from the north and the center and the south of the country, as we do from coast to coast to coast in Canada. We have geologists, architects, engineers, biologists, clinicians, economists, communications professionals, and everyone else, who are all at this table because this problem involves all of those things. Investment in research.
Dag, when you hear this, what do you think?
Oh, it's a lot of ideas and thoughts, but one thing that came into my mind is the uranium caves you have in Canada, because we are not allowed to find uranium in Sweden, not yet. We will go there for sure. We were there in the 70s. And that must be a dangerous workplace somehow. And how is that controlled? Do you have personal dose meters in the cave? Or?
So Canada is amongst the world's largest miners and exporters of uranium. And one of the first instances of a mass population exposure of radon that caused lung cancer was observed in Canada in the 1950s in Elliott Lake, Ontario. And it was observed that 50+% of overwhelmingly men who went down those mines within a decade were being diagnosed with end-stage lung cancer. And so our uranium mines by the 1970s, the 1974 Ontario Commission basically said, yep, radon causes lung cancer in the miners. We mitigated the mines. So our uranium mines and our other types of mines are very carefully ventilated to minimize exposure to radon. And then, of course, a decade after that, we realized it can be just as high in our residential houses, and that gave birth to sort of the longer process of residential mitigation in those. But the uranium mines of Canada are, to the best of my knowledge, no longer cancer-causing from a radon perspective.
That's impressive.
Because of mitigation that happened in the 1970s. Yeah.
And going back to research and your team, you're studying radon exposure through samples like toenails.
Yes.
How does that work? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, so first I'll start by saying why. So one of the challenges in medicine is to understand whether a lung cancer is or isn't attributable to radon, whether wholly or in part. And so that's one thing, assigning the number of cases that are radon is responsible for. But before that, it's equally important to understand our personalized radon exposure history. And the reason for that is we want to screen you for lung cancer just like today, we screen heavy tobacco smokers. So if you demonstrate you've smoked a sufficient number of cigarettes over a sufficient amount of time, you have X amount of risk that you can estimate from that, and we'll screen you. And the idea there is we'll catch you at stage 1 lung cancer, and we just cut it out and you go on with the rest of your life, versus end stage. Because lung cancer is a hidden disease. You will not typically manifest any symptoms until you are more or less stage 4, it's already everywhere. But so lung cancer screening programs exist in Canada. There is no way at this time to determine whether a person's individual risk from radon is sufficient, because there's no Canadian, I imagine no one in Europe either, has a valid radon test from every home, school, and workplace they've ever lived in going back 25 years. It's very rare. Functionally as a society, not a thing. So how do you get that information? Well, the answer turns out to be in our nails. Radon, when we inhale it, precipitates as solid radioisotopes. And most of that is quite quick, but it all turns into solid radioactive lead. And that solid radioactive lead has a half-life of more than 2 decades. And your body treats it like it does all lead. It puts it in your skin, in your hair, in your nails. And we thought, well, not everyone has hair, and not everyone has or is going to give us some skin. Wouldn't want that anyway. But what's a tissue that we're always shedding? And it's nails, fingernails and toenails. And we went for the toenails because they grow slower. You're less likely to do the dishes with your toes. And in the winter, at least, you're probably more willing to give us some toenail samples because you're perhaps not painting them as much as you otherwise might. So we've been collecting toenails, and we've developed a process by which we can measure vanishingly small amounts of these radioactive decay products from radon, and they only come from radon, and it worked. So the little pilot project was published late last year, and on the strength of that, we were provided millions of dollars to do a large-scale validation of that. It's underway right now. We're about 8,000 people signed up out of 10,000 we want for radon testing at the same time as toenail testing. I've got thousands of toenails showing up to lab, visualize that. Yeah. And the very hard work from two of my, young scientists, Dr. Carrie Miller, she's an atomic physicist, Dr. Dustin Pearson, he's an everythingologist like me. He does biology and all the other stuff. And, they're really leading this project. And with the hope is that the pilot project work, that the validation trial will work. And at the end of this day, we'll have a process by which anyone can just give us some toenails. We will analyze those and give you a relatively reliable readout of your lifetime radon exposure, or at least 2 decades worth of radon exposure.
So 20 years?
We think about 20 years, about 15 years. And what's interesting is that, we can see people who have mitigated their houses and they still had the high radon. Because again, the half-life of these radioactive decay products is 20 years. Yeah. And so the body processes lead very slowly. And so for both of those reasons, we think it's going to be somewhere between 15 to 20 years to say if you've eliminated high radon, that it's cleared from your system. But that's enough period, because that's also the latency period for lung cancer.
But you see, some people then will automatically think that, okay, I'm using socks, I will not have a problem with radon.
Aha. Well, it's not that the radon precipitates on your toenails. It is that you're breathing it in, and your lungs are taking it to the lead to everywhere else in your body, and your toenails just happen to be one of the ways we shed it.
That's important.
Yeah, that's really important.
So they understand that.
No gloves, no clothing, none of that stuff. It matters. It's what you're absorbing every time you go into any building, whether that's home, school, or work, that breathe high radon. You're walking away with those in your lungs, and your body's putting them places. And it's trying to get rid of it. It's not very good at it. We've never evolved to cope with radon, so that's why.
That's excellent then, because more or less then when you're doing studies about the number of people getting lung cancer, you can also pick the nails and calculate the 20 years dose.
Yes. That is the hope. So we just received a grant a few months ago. So this project isn't off the ground yet, but it'll be off the ground this year. And that is to specifically study a large number of people living with lung cancer, matched to healthy controls, ideally from the same house, get toenail samples, radon levels as well from a valid passive radon test, and actually look at the differences, all as a function of genetics. Because genetics plays a lot. Genetic ancestry carries different risks. Some people are innately susceptible to lung cancer if also exposed to something like radon or tobacco or something else, and others aren't. And we need to understand all of that.
But if you look in the future, what do you think? Could we do like a blood test to get the result in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it'll probably be a toenail test right now, but there's nothing, we could also theoretically find something that might be in blood serum or hair or, something like that, some tissue, some medical test that we would provide people perhaps at a certain age and say, oh, yep, you have a historic radon exposure over this amount. That means the following to your risk. Please, would you go for screening?
Yeah, so this is like the if you see the pattern is like you do the nail test and then
Yep.
you're at risk and you do screening.
Yep.
You don't think we will do a broader screening? You still
Well,
need to.
I mean, you could envisage it like we do breast cancer screening, mammography, or colonoscopy for colorectal cancer. It would be like that. You know, it's always a weight of, you don't want to screen everybody. So a low dose CT scan is what you would do for a lung cancer screen. That is also radiation. It's too expensive, and you wouldn't want to give everyone that radiation. The toenail test is risk free essentially. I mean, it's no more risk than cutting your own toenails. So you could envisage that might be deployed more universally. I'm not going to say universally because not everyone might benefit from that in the future. But the idea would be you would do a lot more toenail testing, and then only the lung cancer screens you need to do.
Mm-hmm. But is it possible then, how much will it cost then to do one toenail analysis?
Well, right now it's in the development phase.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Once it's scaled,
Can it be less than $50 or $100 or?
Oh, it's already at around the $100 mark, not
Okay.
including salary for the team. But
It's
yeah,
not too bad.
No. It's not going to be super expensive.
So what kind of equipment do we need to do that?
Now here's the magic. Right. Okay. So we had to build a very specialized lab. It was a great deal of fun to design this lab. I did so. Really, I left it up to my good colleague, Dr. Mike Weiser, and he is a atomic physicist. You have to build a metal-free laboratory.
Okay.
I always joke it's Magneto's prison. No metal inside, otherwise you're in trouble. And the reason for that is you're measuring femtogram levels of radioactive lead. Very, very, very tiny. And any stable lead shed from, say, door hinges or taps, even a screw used in a lighting fixture, is going to raise the background level. And because you want to see things here, you have to lower that to see differences between people. So you have to build these special metal-free labs. And if you have that, which is not easy to do and not cheap to do, I can confirm, I have to pay the bills, all you need is an inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer and the right know-how in order to process the samples, and you can do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Dag, when you see, like in Sweden, we call the lung cancer the quiet cancer form because it's very often shown very late. You're in like stage 3 or 4, and then it's not even curable. Do you think that this could be something that we could inspire to actually screen people earlier? Because, like I said before,
of course.
then
I think a lot of people want to be screened earlier, but there's no money there. Who will pay for it? And I just thinking about this toenail test, and if you can prove that, okay, I have been exposed to quite high level, I can show the result, and then I get the permission into hospital, okay, with your exposure, I will get the screening free. That's my dream then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could also open it up as well. Anyone could pay for their own toenail test if they
that's also
wanted.
another
But
way
you would
then.
also, ideally make it systematic. You could envisage someone who tests their house for radon, they realize it's high, or perhaps their workplace was tested for radon and it came back high. They want to get a toenail test tomorrow, right? And to see really what the scale of their personal exposure was. Others, you might implement it. Everyone at age 50 gets one, and then because that's around the age we would screen people for lung cancer in Canada. It's usually between 50 to 75. So maybe at age 49, everyone goes forward for their toenail test, just as we do today for colonoscopy, right? In Canada, we're just about to lower the age to about 45 for colon cancer screening, and that really saves lives. These things pay for themselves. If you do not have to treat someone for stage 3 or 4 lung cancer, you are shaving a zero off the end of lung cancer treatment costs. It goes in Canada an average cost of something like $200,000 a case down to $20,000 a case if you catch at stage 1. And most importantly, you can treat with curative intent, because you can cure many lung cancers, or you go into very, very long-term remission, right? Basically, it's just a bit of surgery or a bit of radiation, and it's gone. If you catch it before it's spread anywhere. And that's vital. I think lung cancer screening is going to be an absolute game changer in turning your silent disease into your visible survivor disease. like we have done for breast cancer and some other cancer types.
So, I mean, you're talking about plasma mass spectrometer. I assume it's ICP-MS.
That's right.
Yeah. And ICP-MS is not expensive. It's $250,000 or so. That's
This particular machine was a bit more expensive than that.
Okay,
But
but it's standard equipment in an analysis lab. And like you have all the labs doing water analysis and so on. They're using ICP-MS. So that can be you just.
The metal-free lab is the hard part.
Yeah, that's the part, because
the hard part.
to reach the femto levels.
Yeah, and you need it's not just your average ICP-MS. In this case, it's one that does have the sensitivity to pick apart every different isotope of lead, because you have to, the magic here was actually you measure the amount of radioactive lead as a function of stable lead, because everyone is shedding different amounts of lead depending upon your health. For some people, a sudden loss in weight, say, your New Year's resolution stuck and you just lost 20 pounds, you're going to actually be shedding, because you've shed fat, you're going to be shedding more lead as a whole. Yeah. And with that comes some radioactive. We need to always understand the total amount of lead there. So you have to measure all the lead isotopes to do this. Yeah, and then it applies to other medical scenarios as well.
But if you would look back like 10 years ago, would you actually think that you could find out to see this? Because it really feels like a game changer, to be honest.
10 years ago, I hadn't a clue.
No.
That this would be A, what I was doing today, and B, that we would be working on an atomic physics approach to a biological scenario with an epidemiological problem with a built environment and geological source. Hadn't a clue. Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. And those conversations really came from just chatting across disciplines, bringing young scientists together, chatting with old scientists as well. And I had conversations with my geological science friends, and they said, "Oh, do you know Mike?" And he's an atomic physicist. And then we got talking, and he said, "Well, how about this?" And we just kind of went from there. Yeah.
But when it comes to risk awareness, do you think that many people still doesn't test their homes because they don't know about the risks?
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, nobody told us.
Yeah.
And I come from the perspective of, we've been shouting this from the rooftops, figuratively speaking, as have many, many other people across government sections and others for a long time. But if you're not communicating where people are and they never see the message, of course, it might as well be invisible. Another silent problem. Today, of course, the way we communicate is quite fractured as a society, especially across age groups. But word of mouth is always the best and most effective. So events like this really do help. And working together with national broadcasters, local journalists. We even tried a project with micro-influencers on Instagram. Yeah. And that works. Yeah. All of that works. Yeah, you have to communicate and then tell people clearly and plainly what the risks are. And most importantly, this is, in Canada, one of the most prevalent sources of cancer, one of the most lethal, but the most preventable. And all you need to know is that it exists as a problem, you can test for it, and if it's high, you can fix it.
Dag, do you feel here that in Sweden you do a great job, but you feel that the government and the authorities could do more?
Yes, I mean, you see some levels of research money coming out from the Radiation Protection Institute in Sweden. The working authorities, I don't see any money coming out for some investigations. And I hope that it will be released more money for that, because it's so important. But I have a lot of concerns there. The concerns is new houses in Sweden. They don't care really about the measurements. Even it's written it should be less than 200 becquerel per cubic meter, but they don't measure it. And then even in new houses, they can have more than 200 becquerel. Yeah. But the idea here is that can we find a method that proves that this lung cancer is caused by radon? Scientifically, we are there. So I hope that we come to that conclusion. And what is your comment about that, Aaron?
So that research, I can confirm, is underway by many people. A lot of people are looking for the what we call the cancer mutation signature of, in this case, radon-induced lung cancer. We already know what it is for tobacco. We can gene sequence a tumor and say, yep, that's tobacco, or that was asbestos, or that was X. Right? And we do that for many different types of cancer. We do not know what it is for lung cancer right now, but there are signatures that have been sequenced, which we call orphan gene signatures, meaning it's there in patient samples, but we don't have its parent. One or more of those orphans will be the child of radon.
Yeah.
And the question is how to get there. The type of research that we're doing right now, where we're able to sign up tens of thousands of people with cancer, with known radon exposure, will really help that. Gene sequencing for genetic risk will really help that. Being able to model it in laboratories will really help that. For a long time, research into radon, or alpha particle radiation, I should say, which is the type of radiation radon emits, has been limited because a standard laboratory didn't have the tools to deliver radon. Everyone had an X-ray machine, but you couldn't deliver alpha particles unless you happened to live next to a particle accelerator, which cost billions of euros to build. And even if you have your lab next to them, you might not get on there for more than half an hour a month. You can't do an experiment like that where you're trying to model radon where everyone is exposed daily. So we had to innovate around that, which we did in 2020, and now we're able to model some of these experimentally. So optimistically, my hope is that we will have an answer to that question by the 2030s.
So within 5 years?
Within the 2030s.
Yeah.
Okay, so
5 to 10. Let's say 5 to 10 years.
Is that the promise?
It is an optimistic hope.
Okay.
Yes, it's an optimistic hope. We're working on it now. So not just we, but others are. Yeah.
But in Sweden, we have 500 cases where people die every year due to lung cancer. Is radon a bigger health problem that than people realize?
I think so.
Yeah.
Partially, it's because we cannot easily ascribe every case to a known cause. In Canada, at least, radon is acknowledged the second leading cause of all lung cancers and the leading cause amongst people who don't smoke tobacco. Now, that's 2 out of 5 people in Canada right now. They come to clinic, they have lung cancer, they've never smoked, or not smoked so little or so long ago, it cannot be nicotine, cannot be that. We have estimated, based on population attributable risk calculations, based on robust amounts of data, that about 12% on average, but it really varies from 3 to 26% of cases of lung cancer in Canada are caused by just radon at a cost of something like $750 million annually every year to the healthcare system just to treat those cases. So this is a huge problem. And $750 million buys a lot of lung cancer prevention. So that's a really important thing to do when you have these numbers and a sense of how big the problem is.
Is it so high? 2 or 5, 40% is caused by non...
40% of Canadian lung cancers, depending where you look, sometimes it's up to 60%, are not due to tobacco. Like Sweden, we stopped smoking tobacco.
Yes.
Very effectively. In fact, there's only a 1% difference in the tobacco smoking rate between our 2 countries. But cancers, especially a type of lung cancer called non-small cell lung cancer, which you tend to see more in non-tobacco smokers, that's been persistently high and is not dropping at all in both sexes, where the type of lung cancer that you more associate with tobacco use continues to drop. So we've sort of flatlined at the non-tobacco lung cancer causes, which of course will be a combination of radon, air pollution, genetic risk, inflammation, things like that.
In Sweden, we have like 3,000 lung cancer cases every year, and it's still that level. It's not going down. Can it be a late effect that, okay, we stopped smoking 15 years ago, still we're seeing a problem that we smoked earlier?
Oh, sure. Yeah, the
so
latency,
it will come down slowly?
Yeah. Well, okay, so yes, you can see that. So the lung cancers that you see today are a reflection of what were triggered 13 to 15 years ago. That's about the latency period. And so there's always a lag in the system. So, but if you look at the trajectory of most tobacco cessation, I mean, it was really like this. And we're sort of now, it's sort of sweet. In fact, if anything, tobacco is going to go up a bit with vaping, right, in both countries. And we do not know at this point.
It's a lot of particles on that.
It's a lot of particulate. We don't know fully the relationship between vaping and lung cancer, probably less than traditional tobacco smoking. But regardless, we know right now 2 out of 5 people with lung cancer that were caused 12, 13, 15 years ago aren't heavy tobacco smokers or never smoked at all in their lives. So that illustrates how big this problem is for sure in both Europe and North America.
If you could choose one policy in Canada, or if you want to make it global, that would reduce the radon-related cancer, what would that be?
Well, I got my dream came true in Canada this Christmas with the change to our building code, where we had a proactive radon reduction measure. What my hope is today is that actually gets implemented efficiently and effectively. So that is the magic wand that I would love to wave internationally, because if we just don't build houses with high radon, no one's going to get radon-induced cancer. Acknowledging that is perhaps not a wand that I can wave, the one down from that is lung cancer screening, the implementation of lung cancer screening, because that's not just important for radon, that's important for all the non-tobacco lung cancers, and it's being implemented for tobacco, so you'll catch everybody. And again, to eliminate that silent disease state to something that is visible and preventable and curable.
Dag, now when you listen, what do you want to put up on your wish list?
I think about vaping, you almost not smoke inside today, but vaping you do inside.
Yes, that's true.
And the particle levels going up.
Yes.
And you know that radon sticks to 0.3 or 1 micrometer particles.
Yeah.
So what will happen then, that the radon level will go up like 2 times.
Yes.
If you smoke in a room. So in reality, you increase the risk 2 times by smoking in the room, also vaping in the room. The exposure radon is really going up.
You're absolutely correct. And again, that grant that we won a few months ago, it's designed for the first time to measure the amount of indoor air particulates upon which radon can attach and then get into the lungs. I always call it the radon taxi, right? It is a vehicle with which radon really much more effectively deposits in the lungs. The dirtier the air, the higher the radiation dose you get.
Yes.
And we have really good radon data, but we don't have good indoor air particulate data. We have a lot of good outdoor air particulate data, especially in the era in North America anyway, of forest fires. Every summer we're plagued with forest fire smoke. Sometimes that smoke's coming from California or from Quebec or from next door. Vaping is part of that. Candles have always been at the table here, figuratively speaking. Cooking fumes, of course. Now, of course, all of those will be in houses at greater or lesser levels, depending on the people, depending on the house, of really effective ventilation or less effective ventilation. You have to understand that. So we're doing it right now. And so again, hopefully that's a 5-year project. So again, talk to me in the 2030s and we'll have an answer.
So your conclusion is that candles are dangerous to have inside?
Well, I think having dirty air is something that you should aspire not to have for lung health. If your air is otherwise well ventilated, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dag, do you have any final words?
The final word is that I hope that this program or this webinar, this stream will inspire young researchers to focus on radon, because you have great laboratory work here. You can do ICP-MS, you can do studies on nails, and you can do a lot of environmental studies. And I hope that it will be an inspiration here that you should go ahead and do the same. Focus on radon research if you have a possibility to select your path.
And like we said, if you look back 10 years ago, you wouldn't even guess that the research you do now that really is helping and showing great results would be there.
Yeah, it's been one of the most satisfying things that I have been able to contribute as a scientist to my society, to the world perhaps. It's also been very fruitful because I've learned so much. I mean, I'm a trained biologist. Did I ever dream I'd be writing a paper with economists? Well, I've just done that. With behavioral scientists, geoscience. So whatever you're interested in as a young scientist, you can. It doesn't take much to broaden those horizons and do something that pulls from every trick of the trade to solve a problem that your society has. And that's one of the most satisfying things you can do. So certainly my students have enjoyed that and been rewarded for that very, very nicely with medals in some cases, literally, but certainly with a strong career trajectory. So it's a very powerful thing you can do.
Thank you so much for coming here, and good luck with the research. We will really follow it in the future, because we also believe that it will make a great change for Canada, Sweden, and the world in it. So thank you so much, and thank you everybody that has been watching, and hopefully young researchers or old ones that will be inspired.